London's elite mocked Arthur Pendergast as the stuttering fool, a trembling recluse whose father couldn't bear to watch. When Lady Amelia rejected a wealthy viscount to marry this worthless noble, the ballroom erupted in cruel laughter. Bets were placed on her misery, predicting she threw her life away on a broken man. But the crowd was blind. Beneath Arthur's shaking exterior lay a spy master holding the empire's fate. No one expected that 6 months later, the King of England would drop to one knee, not for Amelia, but for her husband. This is the story of the man everyone underestimated. The year was 1789, and the air inside the Duchess of Devonshire's ballroom was thick enough to choke a commoner. It smelled of beeswax candles, expensive French powder, and the distinct metallic tang of malicious gossip. Lady Amelia Hartwell stood near the periphery of the dance floor, her fingers tightening around her fan, until the ivory ribs threatened to snap. At 21, Amelia was already nearing the dangerous age of spinsterhood by London standards. She was beautiful, certainly possessed of dark, intelligent eyes, and a spirit that her father, the Earl of Somerset, frequently complained was too sharp for a woman's own good. But she was also poor. Her father's gambling debts were the worst kept secret in the peerage. She needed a match, and she needed one tonight. "Smile, Amelia," her mother hissed, pinching her arm through the silk of her sleeve. "Lord Reginald is approaching." Lord Reginald Sterling, the Viscount of Wrexham. He was handsome in the way a statue is handsome, cold, hard, and utterly hollow. He was also rich enough to buy the Somerset estate 3 times over. He swept toward them, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. "Lady Amelia," Reginald said, bowing low. His eyes didn't meet hers. They scanned her body like a merchant inspecting a broodmare. "You look adequate this evening. The blue suits you, though I dare say red, would have hidden your blush better when I tell you my news." "And what news is that, my lord?" Amelia asked, keeping her voice steady. "I have spoken to your father. He has agreed. We are to be married before the month is out." He said it loudly. Too loudly. Heads turned. Fans snapped shut. It wasn't a proposal. It was a proclamation of ownership. Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. "My lord, surely such a conversation should happen in private." "Why?" Reginald laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "Everyone knows the Earl's situation. I am doing your family a charity, Amelia. You should be curtsying." The humiliation burned hot in her chest. The surrounding nobility tittered behind their hands. She was being sold right here on the parquet floor, and he expected gratitude. It was then that the glass shattered. A waiter navigating the edge of the crowd had collided with a guest. A tray of champagne flutes crashed to the floor. The guest in question stood frozen champagne soaking his worn velvet coat. It was Lord Arthur Pendergast. The room went silent, then erupted into fresh titters. Arthur was the second son of the late Duke of Ashbourne, but he was nothing like his formidable ancestors. He was 25, pale, with messy sandy hair, and spectacles that always seemed to be sliding down his nose. He had a severe stutter and was rumored to be simple. He spent his days in libraries and his nights presumably avoiding human contact. He was the worthless noble. "Look at him," Reginald sneered, pointing a manicured finger. "Pendergast the puddle. Can't even walk without causing a disaster. Someone ought to sweep him up with the glass." Arthur was trembling. He bent down, trying to pick up the shards with his bare hands. I am so sorry." He stammered, his face a mask of misery. A shard cut his finger. A drop of bright red blood welled up. "Leave it, you fool," Reginald shouted, clearly enjoying having 2 victims tonight. "You'll only make it worse. Go home, Arthur, if you can remember the way." The laughter was cruel, raucous, and unforgiving. It was the sound of a pack of wolves turning on the weakest member. Amelia looked at Reginald, his face twisted in a bully's glee. Then she looked at Arthur, kneeling in the wine and glass, clutching his bleeding hand, his eyes squeezed shut against the mockery. Something inside Amelia, that sharp spirit her father hated, snapped. She didn't want safety. She didn't want Reginald's money if it came with his cruelty. She stepped away from her mother. "Amelia, where are you going?" her mother whispered frantically. Amelia ignored her. She walked across the dance floor, her heels clicking rhythmically in the sudden silence. She stopped in front of the kneeling Arthur Pendergast. "Lord Arthur," she said, her voice ringing clear as a bell. He looked up, blinking behind his spectacles. His eyes were a surprising shade of grey, stormy and deep. Terror swam in them. "Lady Amelia." "You are bleeding," she said, softly. She took her own handkerchief, fine lace meant for flirting, not first aid, and knelt beside him. The crowd gasped. A lady did not kneel in spilled champagne. She wrapped the cloth around his finger. His hand was shaking violently, but his skin was warm. "Thank you," he whispered, the stutter gone for a brief second. Amelia stood up and offered him her hand. "Stand up, my lord." Arthur took it. He rose, towering over her. He was taller than people realized, mostly because he spent his life hunching. Amelia turned to Reginald. The Viscount looked as though he had swallowed a lemon. "You are mistaken, Lord Reginald," Amelia said, her voice carrying to the gallery. "I cannot marry you." "Excuse me." Reginald's face went purple. "Your father has sold, has agreed." "My father can agree to what he likes," Amelia said. "But I will not marry a man who finds joy in the humiliation of others. It shows a weakness of character that no amount of gold can hide." "You have no other choice," Reginald roared. "Who else would have you?" "You are a pauper's daughter." Amelia looked at Arthur. He was staring at her, as if she were a celestial being. It was a reckless, insane gambit. It was social suicide. But looking at his grey eyes, she saw kindness. And kindness, she decided, was worth more than gold. "Lord Arthur," Amelia said, turning to him, "I hear your estate in Northumberland has a magnificent library." Arthur's mouth opened and closed. It does. And I hear you are in need of a wife to manage your household," she continued, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. I... Arthur looked at Reginald, then at the crowd, and finally at Amelia. He seemed to straighten just an inch. "I would be honored." "Then I accept," Amelia said. The silence that followed was absolute. Reginald laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. "Fine. Marry the idiot. Marry the stuttering duke. You'll be begging at my door within a year, Amelia. You'll be starving in a cold castle with a husband who can't even string a sentence together." He stormed out. Amelia's mother fainted. Her father, the Earl, was already reaching for a drink. But Amelia didn't let go of Arthur's hand. He squeezed her fingers, gently terrified, but holding on as if she were the only anchor in a storm. Did you mean it?" Arthur whispered to her, as the music hesitantly started up again. Amelia looked up at him. She had just destroyed her life. She had married the laughing-stock of London. But for the first time in years, she felt free. "Yes, Arthur," she said. "I meant it. Take me home." The carriage ride to Northumberland took 4 days. 4 days of silence. They were married 3 days after the ball in a ceremony so small it was almost clandestine. The vicar rushed through the vows. Her father didn't attend. He had sent a letter disowning her for foolishness beyond measure. Arthur sat opposite her in the carriage reading a book. He barely spoke, only offering her food or water with a shy, trembling hand. When he did speak, the stutter was so severe it was painful to watch. He seemed to shrink into himself, terrified of offending her. Amelia spent the journey staring out the window, watching the lush green of the south give way to the harsh, craggy moors of the north. "What have I done?" she thought. Reginald was cruel, but he was powerful. I am now the wife of a man who is afraid of his own shadow. They arrived at Blackwood Manor at dusk. It was an imposing structure of dark stone perched on a cliff overlooking a churning grey sea. It wasn't the ruin Reginald had predicted, but it was austere, cold, lonely. The staff were few. Were an elderly butler named Higgins and a stern housekeeper, Mrs. Graves. They looked at Amelia with suspicion. "Welcome home, my lady," Arthur stammered as he helped her down. "It is not much, but it is safe." Their first month was a study in isolation. They had separate bedrooms. Arthur spent his entire day in the West Wing, his study, and forbade anyone from entering. "He plays with his toy soldiers," Mrs. Graves told Amelia one morning while pouring tea. The housekeeper's tone was dripping with disdain for her master. Hours and hours in there, moving little pieces on a map, like a child. Amelia felt a flush of anger. "He is your master, Mrs. Graves. You will speak of him with respect." Mrs. Graves curtsied, but the smirk remained. "As you say, my lady. But the village calls him Mad Arthur. They say he talks to ghosts in there." Amelia decided she had had enough. She was the mistress of this house, and she would not live with a stranger. One rainy Tuesday, she waited until Arthur went down for his meagre dinner. He sat at the end of the long table, staring at his soup. "Arthur," she said. He jumped his spoon, clattering. Yes. Why do you hide from me?" He looked down. I do not wish to bore you. I know why you married me. To escape him. You do not need to pretend to like me." His self-loathing was so palpable it broke her heart. "I am your wife, Arthur. We are partners, or we should be." She paused. "Mrs. Graves says you play with toy soldiers all day. Is that true?" Arthur went rigid. His eyes darted to the door, checking if the servants were listening. For a second, the stutter vanished. "Is that what she says?" "Yes." He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Let them think it. It is better that way." "Better why?" "Because," he said, standing up, "if I am a fool, no one will watches me." He left the table before she could ask more. But Amelia was observant. She noticed things. She noticed that riders came to the house late at night, men in dark cloaks on fast horses. They never stayed long, and they never came to the front door. They went straight to the side entrance of the West Wing. She noticed that despite the poverty of the estate, the candles Arthur burned in his study were of the highest quality, wax-smokeless expensive. She noticed that the toy soldiers Mrs. Graves mentioned were never left out. The turning point came 2 months into their marriage. Amelia was in the garden pruning roses when a carriage arrived. It bore the royal crest. Her heart stopped. Had the king come? But it wasn't the king. It was a man in a red military uniform, flanked by guards. He looked important. He looked angry. He stormed past Higgins. "Where is Pendergast? Where is the little coward?" Amelia dropped her shears and ran inside. She found the military man in the hallway, looming over Arthur. Arthur was cowering against the wall, shaking, clutching a book to his chest. I don't know what you mean, General." Arthur was stammering. "Don't lie to me, you wretch." The general grabbed Arthur by the collar. "The intelligence report, sir. They came through this sector. You must have seen the courier. I only read books," Arthur wailed. Please don't hurt me." Amelia rushed forward. "Unhand him." The general turned, sneering. "Ah, the new wife, the one who married the village idiot." He shoved Arthur away. Arthur stumbled and fell. "This is my house," Amelia said, her voice shaking with rage. "Get out." "I am General Sir Thomas Gage," the man spat. "And your husband is suspected of harboring French sympathizers. He's too stupid to be a spy, but he's incompetent enough to let them pass." He looked at Arthur with disgust. "Look at him. A disgrace to the peerage. If I find you've been negligent, Pendergast, I'll have you hanged for treason." The general marched out. Amelia ran to Arthur. He was on the floor, breathing hard. "Arthur, are you all right?" She reached for him. He looked up. And then something happened that chilled her to the bone. The fear in his eyes. It evaporated. Instantly. He adjusted his spectacles. He stood up, not clumsily, but with the fluid grace of a cat. He brushed the dust off his coat. He looked at the door where the general had exited, and his expression was not one of a terrified fool. It was a look of cold, calculating, predatory intelligence. "Arthur," she whispered. He turned to her. He raised a finger to his lips. "Higgins," Arthur said. His voice was deep, smooth. There was zero trace of a stutter. "Prepare the carriage. The general is heading into a trap at the chaotic junction near York. I need to get a message to London before he destroys 3 months of my work." Amelia stared at him. You don't stutter." Arthur looked at her, a wry, sad smile playing on his lips. "No, Amelia, I don't." He walked over to her, taking her hands. His grip was firm, confident. "I apologize for the deception. But you have married the most dangerous man in England, and right now we have a war to win." The silence in the hallway following Arthur's revelation was heavier than the stones of Blackwood Manor. Amelia stared at the man she had married. The stoop in his shoulders was gone. The spectacles, which always seemed on the verge of sliding off, sat firmly on the bridge of a nose that suddenly looked patrician and sharp. His eyes, previously clouded with feigned anxiety, were clear grey and devastatingly intelligent. "You're a liar," Amelia breathed, taking a step back. The betrayal stung more than Reginald's cruelty ever could. She had given up her life for a man who didn't exist. "I am a patriot, Amelia," Arthur said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that sent a shiver down her spine. "Lying is merely the tool of my trade." He glanced at the grandfather clock, ticking loudly in the corner. I do not have time to explain everything. General Gage is a blundering fool who is about to lead a regiment into a Jacobin ambush near York. I have to send a rider to divert them. You're not going anywhere until you tell me who you are, Amelia asserted, blocking his path. I gave up everything for the stuttering Duke. I deserve to know the man who took his place. Arthur looked at her. Really looked at her, assessing her as if she were a complex cipher. He saw the rigid spine, the determined jaw. Very well, he said abruptly. Follow me. He led her rapidly down the corridor toward the forbidden west wing. He produced a complex iron key from an inner pocket, unlocked the heavy oak door, and ushered her inside. Amelia gasped. It was a library, yes, but it was also a war room. The scent of stale tobacco and sealing wax hung heavy in the air. The toy soldiers Mrs. Graves scoffed at were indeed laid out on an enormous table. But they were arranged on a sprawling, incredibly detailed map of northern France and the English Channel. Wooden markers denoted troop movements, supply lines and naval blockades. Stacks of papers covered every surface letters, written in varying hands. Some burned at the edges, others covered in numerical codes. This! Amelia walked to the table, her fingers hovering over a marker placed near Calais. This isn't a game. No, Arthur said, closing the door and locking it from the inside. He walked to a desk and began furiously writing in code. Europe is burning, Amelia. The French Revolution isn't just removing heads in Paris. It's an ideological contagion they intend to spread here. There are sympathies in London. Powerful men who think chaos is a ladder. He looked up from his writing. My job, my real job, entrusted to me by Prime Minister William Pitt himself, is to ensure that contagion doesn't cross the Channel. I run the northern network of intelligence. Every piece of information from the Scottish border to Yorkshire comes through this room. Amelia felt dizzy. But the stutter, the clumsiness at the ball, the fear. Arthur finished the note and sealed it with a plain wax stamp. Think Amelia, who suspects the village idiot, who guards their tongue around the stuttering fool who spills champagne on himself. I am invisible because I am pathetic. People say things in front of me they would never say in mixed company because they think I am too stupid to understand. He walked over to her, his expression softening slightly. Reginald was right about one thing at the ball. I was useless, until I realized my weakness could be a weapon. I have stopped 3 assassination attempts on the king's life in the last 2 years, all because conspirators discussed their plans while I was supposedly cowering in a corner nearby. Amelia looked around the room again, seeing it with new eyes. The loneliness, the late-night riders, the isolation. And me, she whispered. Was I just camouflage, a prop to make the performance more convincing? Arthur stopped. The cool, calculating spy master veneer cracked. He reached out, almost touching her cheek, then pulled back. When you knelt in the glass at the Duchess's ball, he said softly, his natural voice thick with emotion. You were the bravest person in the room. I have faced French dragoons who terrified me less than that moment. You saw a broken thing and tried to fix it. I didn't marry you for camouflage, Amelia. I married you because for 5 minutes you made me wish I wasn't just a ghost in my own life. He looked away, jaw tight. But I am a ghost, and I have put you in terrible danger by bringing you here. Gage's arrival means the French know this location is active. They don't know it's me, but they know someone at Blackwood is funneling information. He went to a hidden panel in the bookshelf and pulled out a small, deadly-looking flintlock pistol. He pressed it into her hand. Higgins is taking this message to the courier. I must go to the coast to meet an asset arriving from Boulogne. You stay in your room. Lock the door. If anyone other than me or Higgins tries to enter, use this." Before she could process the weight of the cold metal in her hand, the stuttering Duke was gone, vanishing into the night, leaving Amelia alone in the center of his secret world. Arthur was gone for 3 days. Amelia didn't stay in her room. She spent the time in the West Wing. She didn't understand the codes, but she understood people. She read the reports that weren't ciphered descriptions of informants, psychological profiles of French generals, analysis of court gossip. She realized that Arthur, for all his brilliance with data, struggled with the emotional nuances of his assets. He treated them like chess pieces. Amelia, having navigated the treacherous waters of London society, knew that people were messier than that. She began making notes in the margins of his reports. "This informant is lying. He emphasizes his loyalty too much. This general isn't bold. He's desperate for money. Bribe him instead of fighting him." When Arthur returned late on the 3rd night, soaked to the bone and smelling of sea salt, he went straight to the map room. He stopped when he saw her annotations. He read them in silence for 10 minutes. Amelia sat in a chair, the pistol still hidden in the folds of her dress, waiting for him to dismiss her interference. Instead, he looked up a strange light in his grey eyes. "You think the informant in York is a double agent? He's too perfect," Amelia said, standing. "Nobody gets that lucky 3 times in a row without the enemy letting them win." Arthur stared at the map. "If you're right, General Gage is walking into an even bigger trap than I thought." He looked at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. A genuine smile, one she hadn't seen before. "My God, Amelia, you have a vicious mind. Pitt would love you." That night, the dynamic of Blackwood Manor shifted irrevocably. They were no longer master and ignored wife. They were partners. Arthur taught her the ciphers. He taught her how to spot a tail in a crowded market, how to slip a message into a handshake, how to read the tension in a man's jaw. Amelia, in turn, taught Arthur how to read the room, how to use charm instead of just silence to deflect attention. They worked late into the nights, the candlelight flickering over maps and coded dispatches. A strange, potent intimacy grew between them in that war room. It wasn't the romance of poets. It was forged in adrenaline and shared secrets. 6 months passed. The war in Europe grew hotter, and the shadows around Blackwood grew darker. Then the past came knocking. It was a crisp November afternoon. Amelia and Arthur were in the drawing room, Arthur practicing his stutter for an upcoming trip to London, when Higgins announced a visitor. "Lord Reginald Sterling, Viscount Wrexham." Amelia froze. Arthur's spine stiffened, and instantly his shoulders hunched. The intelligent grey eyes went vacant and watery behind his spectacles. Reginald." Arthur stammered, his voice rising to a pathetic squeak. What a surprise." Reginald swaggered in. He hadn't changed, though. Perhaps he looked a little more careworn, a little more desperate around the eyes. Well, well," Reginald boomed, ignoring Arthur and eyeing the slightly threadbare curtains. "Still living in squalor, I see. And Lady Amelia, you look tired." "Lord Wrexham," Amelia said coldly, "to what do we owe this intrusion?" "Intrusion. I'm merely checking on old friends. I was in the area on business investing in some northern shipping concerns, and thought I'd see if you'd come to your senses yet." He laughed. "I thought perhaps you'd be ready to leave Pendergast the Puddle and return to civilization." Arthur cowered behind a chair. "Please, Reginald, don't be cruel." "Shut up, Arthur," Reginald sneered. Amelia's blood boiled, but she caught Arthur's eye. A microscopic tighten of his lid. "Play the part." "My husband is unwell." "My lord," Amelia said, forcing a tremor into her voice. "Please, if you have business, state it." Reginald poured himself a brandy without asking. As he drank, Amelia noticed something. He kept tapping his breast pocket. It was a nervous tick. A tell. He was carrying something he was afraid to lose. "Actually," Reginald said, putting the glass down, "I do have a proposition. Not for the idiot, but for you, Amelia. My business partners, they value discretion. We need a safe harbor for some of our ships. Blackwood's Cove is secluded. If you can convince your husband to sign over usage rights, there would be a substantial amount of gold in it for you. Enough to buy some decent dresses at least." It was a bribe, but for what smuggling Arthur began to loudly knock his knees together, creating a distraction. I don't understand, but business," he wailed. Reginald rolled his eyes and turned to shout at Arthur. In that split second, Amelia made her move. She feigned a dizzy spell, stumbling toward Reginald. As he instinctively reached out to steady her, her hand slipped into his breast pocket with the lightness of a pickpocket she had read about in Arthur's files. She came away with a folded parchment. "Oh dear, I am faint," she gasped, clutching the paper tightly against her palm, hidden by her handkerchief. "Pathetic," Reginald muttered, pushing her away. "Think on my offer, Amelia. Gold or a lifetime nursing this imbecile." He stormed out, leaving the scent of expensive brandy and cheap ambition behind. The moment the front door closed, Arthur straightened up. The fear vanished. "Did you get it?" he asked, his voice like steel. Amelia held up the parchment. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from exhilaration. Arthur took it to the window. He unfolded it. It was written in French. His face went pale. "My God." "What is it?" Amelia asked, moving to his side. "It's not a shipping manifest," Arthur said grimly. "It's a letter of introduction from a Jacobin tribunal in Paris, addressed to a cell operating in London." He looked at Amelia, his eyes hard. "Reginald isn't just a bully, Amelia. He's a traitor to the crown, and he just led us right to the heart of the conspiracy." The return of Lord and Lady Arthur Pendergast to London was met with precisely the reception Arthur had calculated. Indifference mixed with mockery. They took up residence in the dilapidated Pendergast townhouse in Mayfair, a dusty relic that hadn't seen a proper dusting in a decade. London in 1790 was a powder keg. News from France was bloody. Aristocrats were fleeing across the Channel, bringing tales of the guillotine. Paranoia gripped the English court, yet the parties continued louder and more frantic than ever, as if to drown out the sound of the approaching storm. "You look terrified," Arthur whispered to Amelia, as they stood before the gilded doors of Lord Harrington's winter masquerade. He was back in character, shoulders slumped, eyes darting nervously, hands fidgeting with his cravat. "I am terrified," Amelia murmured behind her fan. "Reginald will be here, and the men from the letter." "Good," Arthur said, a flash of steel in his grey eyes, visible only to her. "We need them all in one room. Remember the signal. If I touch my left lapel, you get out. You run, Amelia. You don't look back." "I am not leaving you," she hissed. "Amelia." "Announcing Lord and Lady Arthur Pendergast." The doorman bellowed, his tone bordering on sarcastic. They stepped into the ballroom. 100 masked faces turned. The whispers started immediately. "The stuttering Duke is back. Look at his poor wife. Did you hear he lost half his fortune on a bad crop investment? Reginald Sterling found them within minutes. He was dressed as a Roman emperor, a costume that suited his arrogance perfectly. He was unmasked, holding a goblet of wine, surrounded by sycophants." "Arthur," Reginald shouted, striding over, "I didn't think you'd have the courage to show your face. Or perhaps you've come to sign those papers for the Cove." Arthur shrank back, nearly knocking over a plant. I just wanted to see them." "Music," he stammered, clutching Amelia's arm as if it were a life raft. Reginald laughed, patting Arthur's cheek with insulting familiarity. "Still the coward. Enjoy the music, Arthur. It might be the last tune you hear before the debt collectors take your boots." He leaned in close to Amelia, his breath hot and wine-soured. "Midnight, Amelia. The library. Bring the signature, or I tell the creditors where your father is hiding in Bath." He strutted away. "He's going to the library at midnight," Amelia whispered. "Is that the meeting?" "No." Arthur said, his voice barely audible. "That's a distraction. He wants to keep you occupied. The real meeting is happening now. Look at the balcony." Amelia shifted her gaze. Up on the mezzanine, shadowed by heavy velvet drapes, 3 men were standing. They weren't watching the dancers. They were watching the royal box, where King George III was scheduled to arrive in less than an hour. One of the men was General Gage, the man who had raided their home months ago. The other 2 were French dignitaries. "Gage is the inside man," Arthur murmured. "He's going to lower the security detail when the king arrives. They aren't going to kill the king with a knife, Amelia. They're going to blow up the royal box." Amelia felt her knees go weak. "How do you know?" "Because," Arthur said, checking his pocket watch, "I smelled gunpowder on Gage's uniform when he passed us at the door. And the orchestra. Listen." Amelia listened. The music was Haydn, but the tempo was wrong. It was erratic. "It's a countdown," Arthur said. "They are timing the explosion to the crescendo. I have to get to the rafters." "You can't go up there alone," Amelia said. "Gage has guards everywhere." "I have to try. You stay here. Keep Reginald talking. If he suspects I'm gone, he'll alert Gage." Arthur squeezed her hand, a brief, desperate pressure, and then melted into the crowd. One moment, he was the clumsy fool, the next. He was a shadow, slipping behind a pillar and vanishing. Amelia was left alone in the swirl of silk and secrets. She scanned the room. Reginald was watching her from across the floor, a smug grin on his face. She had to play her part. She had to be the desperate, broken wife. She walked toward Reginald, forcing her hands to tremble. "Lord Reginald," she said, her voice breathy. "Amelia," he purred. "Come to your senses. I cannot bear it any more," she lied, tears pricking her eyes. "He is unbearable. The stuttering, the clumsiness. I want a real man." Reginald's ego inflated visibly. He took her arm. "I told you, didn't I? Come, let us drink to your liberation." He led her toward the bar, away from the stairs Arthur had used. It was working. But as they walked, Amelia saw something that made her blood freeze. A waiter was moving toward the royal box, carrying a massive floral arrangement. The flowers were Lily's funereal flowers, and hidden deep within the foliage, she saw the glint of a fuse. The bomb wasn't in the rafters. It was being walked right to the king's seat. Arthur was heading to the wrong place. Amelia looked at the balcony. Arthur was nowhere to be seen. She looked at the royal box. The king had just entered, waving to the crowd. The music was swelling, building toward the crescendo. She couldn't signal Arthur. She couldn't scream without causing a panic that might trigger the device early. She turned to Reginald. "Reginald, dance with me." "What?" He blinked. "Dance with me. Now. Right in the center of the floor. Show everyone that I am yours." Reginald, blinded by vanity, grinned. "With pleasure." He swept her onto the floor. Amelia maneuvered him. She needed to get close to that waiter. The music grew louder. Da-da-da-dum. The waiter was passing the edge of the dance floor. "Spin me," Amelia cried. Reginald spun her. Amelia used the momentum. She let go of his hand. She didn't spin. She launched herself. She collided with the waiter. It was a scandalous, horrific breach of etiquette. The waiter fell. The vase shattered. The flowers scattered. And the bomb, a crude iron sphere with a sizzling fuse, rolled out onto the polished floor, right at the feet of the horrified dancers. The music stopped. The scream stuck in everyone's throat. Reginald stared at the bomb. "What the—" "Get down." The voice didn't come from the floor. It came from the chandelier. Arthur Pendergast swung down from the rafters on a velvet rope, a pistol in each hand. He landed in a crouch between the crowd and the bomb. He didn't stutter. He didn't shake. With a motion too fast to follow, he kicked the bomb toward the open balcony doors. He raised his pistol and fired. The bullet hit the iron sphere mid-air as it sailed over the balcony railing. Boom! The explosion rocked the opera house, shattering the windows and showering the street below in fire and debris. But the ballroom was safe. Silence. Absolute ringing silence. Smoke drifted in from the balcony. Arthur stood in the center of the room, dust on his coat, his spectacles gone, his eyes blazing with a terrifying intensity. He looked at the king in the box above, then at General Gage on the mezzanine. "Secure the exits," Arthur roared, his voice, commanding and authoritative, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Nobody leaves." The ballroom erupted into chaos, but it was a controlled chaos, dictated by the man standing in the center of the floor. "Seize General Gage," Arthur commanded, pointing his remaining loaded pistol at the mezzanine. The royal guards, confused for only a fraction of a second, recognized the tone of absolute authority. They turned their muskets on the general. Gage went for his sword, but he was tackled by his own lieutenants, who realized the wind had changed. Reginald Sterling stood frozen, his face a mask of shock. He looked at the smoking balcony, then at the man he had bullied for years. "Arthur," Reginald whispered. You spoke." Arthur turned slowly to face Reginald. He seemed to grow 3 inches. The slouch was gone. The worthless noble had evaporated, leaving behind a predator. "Yes, Reginald," Arthur said, his voice dripping with icy disdain. "I did. And you are under arrest for high treason, conspiracy to commit regicide, and being a general bore." You can't," Reginald spluttered, looking around for support. "He's a madman. He's the village idiot. Arrest him." "I think not," a voice boomed from above. King George III stood at the railing of the royal box. He looked shaken but furious. "We saw what happened, Lord Wrexham. We saw Lady Amelia risk her life to stop that infernal device. And we saw Lord Pendergast save the lot of you." The king pointed at Arthur. "Approach, Pendergast." Arthur walked toward the royal box. He didn't shuffle. He walked with a military stride, confident and precise. He stopped below the king and bowed not the clumsy bow of a fool, but the sharp, deep bow of a servant of the crown. "Your Majesty," Arthur said clearly. "You have played the fool for a long time, Arthur," the king said, leaning over. "Prime Minister Pitt told me he had a ghost in the north. I did not realize the ghost was you." "It was necessary, sire," Arthur replied. "The enemies of England do not fear a stuttering man. They speak freely around him." Arthur turned back to the crowd. His eyes locked on Amelia. She was still on the floor, surrounded by shattered glass and lilies, her dress torn, her hair wild. He walked to her. The crowd parted, terrified and awed. He offered her his hand. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice softening. The public commander vanishing to reveal the husband. "No." Amelia breathed, taking his hand. She stood up, her legs trembling. "You jumped from a chandelier?" "I calculated the swing." Arthur shrugged, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. The rope was sturdy. Reginald was being dragged away by the guards. He was screaming, "It's a trick! It's all a trick!" Arthur stopped the guards with a raised hand. He walked over to Reginald. "One thing, Reginald," Arthur said, leaning in close. "You called me worthless. You called my wife a pauper. But remember this as you rot in the tower. The worthless noble outsmarted you every single day for 2 years. And the woman you mocked, she has more courage in her little finger than you have in your entire lineage." Arthur nodded to the guards. "Take him away." As Reginald was hauled out, the room remained silent. The entire peerage, the dukes, the earls, the ladies who had laughed behind their fans, stared at Arthur and Amelia. They realized with dawning horror how wrong they had been. They realized that while they were dancing, Arthur Pendergast had been holding up the sky. The king cleared his throat. "Lord Arthur," the king called out. Arthur turned. "It seems we owe you a debt," the king said, "and your wife as well. Come up to the box. We wish to drink with the man who saved our life." And then the King of England did the unthinkable. As Arthur and Amelia ascended the stairs to the royal box, the king stood up and bowed his head to them. The entire room gasped. Then slowly, one by one, the nobles followed suit. The Duchess of Devonshire curtsied low. The earls bowed. The laughter that had haunted Arthur for years was replaced by a silence of profound respect. Arthur didn't look at them. He only looked at Amelia. "Shall we, my lady?" he asked, offering his arm. Amelia smiled, a true, radiant smile. "We shall, my lord." The sunrise that followed the winter masquerade did not just bring a new day. It brought a new era for London society. The scandal was not merely a ripple. It was a tidal wave that washed away the old hierarchies. The morning papers, usually filled with frivolous gossip about hemlines and tea parties, carried headlines that shook the foundations of the peerage. "The savior in the shadows," one read. "The hero of the masquerade," proclaimed another. The trial of Lord Reginald Sterling and General Sir Thomas Gage was the most attended event of the decade. It was swift, brutal, and necessary. When the contents of Reginald's black book, the ledger Amelia had so deftly lifted from his pocket, were read aloud in court, the gasps from the gallery sucked the air from the room. It revealed a rot deep within the aristocracy, a network of 20 high-ranking conspirators willing to sell their king for French gold. Amelia sat in the gallery, her hand resting firmly in Arthur's. She watched the man who had once treated her as a commodity, the man who had laughed at her husband's clumsiness, stand trembling in the dock. Reginald looked small now, stripped of his arrogance and his entourage. When their eyes met across the crowded courtroom, he didn't sneer. He looked away, broken by the realization that the worthless couple had outmaneuvered him at every turn. Justice was served on a grey Tuesday morning, and with the fall of the conspirators, the laughter that had haunted Arthur Pendergast for 25 years was finally permanently silenced. However, the true transformation did not happen in the courtrooms of London, but in the rugged hills of Northumberland. When the Pendergast carriage finally returned to Blackwood Manor, the reception was unrecognizable from their arrival nearly a year prior. There were no whispers of Mad Arthur or the stuttering Duke. As the carriage wound its way through the village capitoffs, were doffed and cheers rang out. The locals, once suspicious and mocking, now lined the streets to catch a glimpse of the Lion of Ashbourne and his formidable wife. The manor itself underwent a metamorphosis. The crown, in gratitude for the lives saved and the treason exposed, granted Arthur a stipend that far exceeded the needs of the estate. The cold, damp stones of Blackwood were warmed by roaring fires in every hearth. The threadbare curtains were replaced with velvet, and the leaking roof was patched with slate. Even the staff had changed. Mrs. Graves, the housekeeper who had once looked down her nose at her childish master, now treated Arthur with a reverence usually reserved for deities. The first time Arthur walked into the dining room after their return, walking tall, speaking clearly, and demanding the finest wine, Mrs. Graves had dropped a tureen of soup in sheer shock. She spent the rest of her days fiercely guarding the West Wing, telling anyone who would listen that she had known all along that the master was a genius working in secret. Yet despite the public acclaim and the restoration of their fortune, Arthur and Amelia did not retire into a life of idle luxury. They had tasted the thrill of the game, and they found that a quiet life of tea and crumpets held little appeal for a couple forged in fire. Arthur officially retired from intelligence work, issuing a public statement that he wished to focus on animal husbandry and the management of his tenants. It was a lie, of course, a beautiful, perfectly crafted lie. The late-night riders continued to come. The dark shapes moving through the mist of the moors were no longer viewed with suspicion by the staff, but with silent understanding. Higgins, the loyal butler, ensured that there was always hot coffee and fresh horses ready at the side entrance. The map room in the West Wing remained the beating heart of the North's defense, though now it was a room of shared command. Amelia no longer needed to hide her sharp mind. She sat across from Arthur, debating strategy decoding ciphers and managing the network of spies that stretched from York to the Scottish Highlands. 3 years passed in this dangerous, exhilarating rhythm. It was a snowy evening in December when the next chapter of their lives beckoned. The wind was howling off the North Sea, battering the stone walls of the manor, but inside the library it was warm and still. Amelia sat in a high-backed armchair near the fire. On her lap sat a toddler with unruly, sandy hair and eyes the color of a stormy sea. William Pendergast, named in honor of the Prime Minister, who had trusted his father when no one else would. The boy was happily chewing on a wooden chess piece, oblivious to the weight of the legacy he had been born into. Arthur sat at his massive oak desk, the surface covered in dispatches from Vienna and Berlin. He wasn't hunched. He was leaning back, watching his wife and son with an expression of profound peace that his younger self would never have believed possible. He broke the silence, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that still sent a thrill through Amelia's heart. "The courier brought something else tonight, Amelia. Something from the Foreign Office." Amelia looked up gently, prying the white knight from William's grip. "Oh, more rumors of unrest in the colonies." "No," Arthur said, standing and walking toward the fire. He leaned against the mantel, the flames casting dancing shadows across his face. A request. They need an envoy in Paris. The revolutionary government is unstable, and the crown needs eyes on the ground. Someone who can play the part of a wealthy, uninterested aristocrat while listening to the whispers in the salons. He paused, looking down at his son. It is a diplomatic cover, of course, but it is deep cover. It would mean living in the viper's nest. Amelia set William down on the rug, where he immediately began an assault on the coal scuttle. She stood and walked to her husband, placing her hands on his chest. She could feel the steady, strong beat of his heart. "Is it dangerous?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Always," Arthur replied, his eyes searching hers. "Paris is a powder keg. One spark and the whole city burns. I told them I would have to discuss it with my wife. I told them I have a son now, and that perhaps my days of jumping from chandeliers are behind me." Amelia smiled, a slow, knowing smile. She reached up and adjusted his collar, a habit from their days of pretending now, a gesture of intimacy. "You are a terrible liar, Arthur Pendergast," she said softly. "You miss the edge. You miss the moment when the air changes, and you know you are the only one who sees the truth." Arthur chuckled, capturing her hand and kissing the palm. "Perhaps, but I would not go without you, and I cannot ask you to bring William into a city on the verge of madness." "We do not leave family behind," Amelia said firmly. "And we do not shy away from duty. If the king needs the Lion of Ashbourne in Paris, then Paris is where we shall go. Besides," she glanced at William, who was now triumphantly holding a piece of coal, "someone needs to ensure you don't get captured by a soprano at the opera again." Arthur laughed, a rich, full sound that filled the cavernous room, chasing away the last lingering ghosts of the lonely, stuttering boy he had once been. "I suppose I have no choice then," he said, pulling her into an embrace. "The desperate bride commands it." "The partner commands it," she corrected, resting her head against his shoulder. They had started as a cruel joke, a punchline whispered behind fans in a London ballroom, a marriage of convenience between a pauper's daughter and a village idiot. But as they stood there, framed by the firelight, Arthur and Amelia knew the truth that the world was only just beginning to understand. They hadn't just survived the laughter. They had conquered it. They had turned their weaknesses into weapons and their shame into armor. They had fooled the world to save it, and in doing so, they had found the only thing that truly mattered. The worthless noble and the woman who saw his worth were ready for their next adventure. And this time, they would face the darkness exactly as they had faced the ballroom together. What a journey. From the humiliating ballroom floor to the heights of heroism. Arthur and Amelia proved that true worth isn't found in titles or gossip, but in courage and loyalty. They fooled the world to save it. If you enjoyed the story of The Silent Duke, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more historical dramas like this. Do you think you could have kept a secret like Arthur's for that long? Or would you have cracked under the pressure? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. We have plenty more tales of underdog nobility, secret romances, and epic twists coming your way. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.